wonderful lunch, and it's a tough job to keep you awake, including myself, because I ate a lot, and I had a very big breakfast this morning. So help me stay awake, because you have to be with me for the next 3 hours, right? No, I guess they just give me 1 hour. And so I will be talking about all the fires that you have started in your gut right now. And well, you heard wonderful lectures this morning. You heard a lecture on gut, you heard about vitamins, you heard about lifestyle, all the importance. And this is what I need to be talking to you about: inflammation, basically inflammation, right? Inflammation sits in the middle of every chronic disorder that you can talk about. Cardiovascular disease, diabetes, dementia, anything, you name it. But let me introduce briefly, before I move on, well, you know this handsome guy who this is. I live in Portland, Oregon. Anybody in the audience has been to Portland, Oregon? It's one of the most beautiful places on this planet. And this is the fall season that we see. You heard Dr. Sol this morning talking about how leaves change all the colors. And we see those beautiful shades of orange, yellow, and red. And this is what we see in Portland. This is what I wake up to every morning, see from my backyard. Wow, right? You're all jealous now. Well, and this is my laboratory. It's called IUmetrics. We are one of the most advanced hormone testing laboratory in the world. We test hormones in saliva, and so we get samples from basically all over the planet. And we love taking care of people. This is something in your neck of the woods, which I really wanted to visit. It's a picture somewhere in Boracay Islands, and they closed, right? That's not fair. See, why I'm showing you all these beautiful pictures is because I want to talk about functional medicine. Nature has created a lot of problems for us, but at the same time, nature has also provided all these solutions right there around us. Who is responsible for messing up the overall health and wellness that we keep talking about? You and I, right? We are responsible. So I want to talk about functional medicine today for the next 1 hour. And I feel very safe talking about functional medicine because if you are here, that means you believe in functional medicine. That means you are open-minded to embrace the concept of functional medicine. So that's why I said I feel safe. What is functional medicine? Well, we keep talking about diseases. We keep talking about diabetes, cancer, heart disease, obesity. We have kind of defined so many disorders. But diseases don't exist. I know you're looking at me with a different look, and I will answer that look. And I will tell you why I said diseases don't exist. We have to really pay much attention to the underlying mechanisms of all of those diseases that we have named. You heard some of the lectures this morning talking about the mechanisms right? There was a beautiful lecture on biochemistry. The mechanisms. We have to pay more attention to the mechanisms because these mechanisms are common to all of those different diseases that we see as of today. It doesn't matter what you want to call that medicine. Well, we talk about integrated medicine. It could be Western medicine, allopathic, osteopathic, regenerative, holistic, or whatever you want to name it. We all have to be open-minded to embrace different beautiful, wonderful concepts that all of these different types of medicine provide to us. We just have to leave aside our egos behind and be open-minded and collaborate and work together to find the right answers. So far, the way we have practiced medicine, we keep talking about healthcare, but where is healthcare? It's only sick care. We have been practicing sick care so far, and this is the reason if you look at projections for next 30, 40 years for any chronic diseases, the numbers are still going up, right? And all these terms are everywhere around us. So common. And this is exactly what I was talking about. If you look at these projections for next 40 years, cancer, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, hypertension, everything is going up. Hello? Is this the time that we need to stop and rethink the way we have practiced medicine or the way we are practicing medicine? I think you will all agree with me on this, that we need to stop now and do something better. Because now we have a lot of information already accumulated, a lot of data from our patients, a lot of research, clinical, basic, everything. We have information now. So now we can make those better decisions to change the way we practice medicine. Why? Because if you look at these statistics, 20 million people, less than 20 million people will die of infectious diseases by 2020. But 50 million people, more than 50 million people will die by 2020 because of chronic diseases. Globally, $2 trillion in lost productivity every year because of all of these issues, right? Statistics is there. We just have to pay attention to what's going on. Well, I know everybody wants to blame one person, one group here, but let's not blame only one. There are many out there. But hey, wait a minute. Why are we blaming others? When this is the concept of our lifestyle, this is the concept of our fitness today. Is there something wrong with this picture? This is who we are today. So why we blame others? It's us. The solution is right inside us. We have to make those changes. You heard some good statements this morning about lifestyle and diet, eat right, and exercise, right? There is data there. There's scientific data already available which has shown how powerful lifestyle changes can be in taking care of all of these chronic diseases. And this is the reason I said that diseases don't exist, and I will tell you more why I said that. We keep talking about blockbuster diseases. We keep talking about pharmaceutical drugs for blockbuster diseases. We need to focus more on the mechanisms that are causing those diseases. And this is what is functional medicine, because diseases don't exist. Those are just the names. Those are just the names of different disorders that we have classified into different categories. But when we start looking at the mechanisms, all of those, at least all of the chronic issues, boils down to just basic common mechanisms And this is what is functional medicine. The systems biology-based approach to individualized medicine that focuses on underlying causes of the disease. This is what is functional medicine. So, my dear friends, it's time for a paradigm shift. I'm really asking for a paradigm shift. It's a completely, totally different concept. See, we know that there is a person's genome, right? And then how that those genes are affected by our lifestyle and the environment that we are exposed to. We know that there are certain imbalances in network of biological systems that affect or interact with all the lifestyle and environment and thereby a person's genome. And then there are symptoms. The problem with the way we have practiced medicine so far is we are caught up in this outermost circle. We are trying to fix these symptoms. We need to focus right here. We need to look at all of these important steps that are involved there, all the important factors that influence the overall health of an individual. We cannot ignore any of these factors, very simple, very well-known factors that are responsible. There are many more other than these listed here that affect the overall health. So let us not focus on what. Let us focus on why. Let us focus on those mechanisms that are responsible and talk about health. Well, let's come back to inflammation. And let's talk about gut inflammation, as I wanted to focus on the gut inflammation today. Let me ask you this. Well, I know there are people in this audience who would say, well, actually, let me put it the other way around. At this time, I feel that the gut is the most important organ in the body. Would you agree with me on that? Wow. That is the first time I heard so many yeses. Because many times I've done this, and sometimes I hear, no, heart is the most important. No, brain is the most important. Somebody said, no, lungs are the most important. How can you say gut is the most important? Let's do this experiment. Well, for you guys it doesn't work, but what I usually do is, let me ask you, how many of you, raise your hand, how many of you in this audience have ever had a heart attack? None? Okay. Anybody in this audience has ever had a stroke? Really? Excellent. None. Anybody in this audience had a pneumonia? Wow. Oh, one. Two. Okay. Anybody in this audience ever in their lifetime, ever had an episode of diarrhea? Did I make my point? Thank you. And that's why I said gut is the most important organ in the body. So, a single layer of epithelial cell lining is what protects us from such huge amount of pathogens, bacteria, environment. That's what we are exposed to, right? In the gut, there's almost like 7,000 to 9,000 different species of bacteria living inside the gut, right? If you weigh all of those bacteria, it's almost 2 to 3 pounds of bacteria which is sitting inside the gut. Amazing, right? And there's all good bacteria and bad bacteria sitting there. So what happens when there is a problem? Well, right here, this is intestine, this is the epithelial lining. So normally there is this immune cells sitting underneath those epithelial cells, right? And anything that passes through this epithelial lining, it gets attacked by the immune system right there sitting and trying to take care of the body against all of the pathogens or any bad stuff that we are exposed to. And that's where exists all the army. So this is kind of the wall is kind of a big wall of a fort, which is the body, protecting this body against all the bad guys, the enemies outside. And so there's this army, the defense mechanism sitting inside. So what happens is, as you see, healthy gut, there's intact intestinal barrier. The cells are properly arranged next to each other, normal permeability, healthy gut flora. Everything is great when there is peace. So what happens when there is declaration of war? Well, there's all of these bad guys, the enemies, attacking from inside the gut, attack and damage the fort, the wall, the epithelial cell lining, and try to get inside, right? And when all the bad guys try to get inside, there is a process called inflammation that begins. When the immune system tries to fight against all of those bad guys, the process of inflammation begins. And we also call this as leaky gut syndrome, right? And there are gap junctions in between these epithelial cells, which are basically responsible to keep those epithelial cells intact, the wall intact. There is a protein called zonulin. Have you heard about this protein, zonulin? Zonulin is a wonderful protein which regulates opening and closure of those gap junctions between these epithelial cell lines. That protein, zonulin, is controlled by our hormones, especially cortisol. And this is the reason stress is the number one factor which affects the protein zonulin. And that zonulin basically, it stops functioning and it allows those gap junctions to open wider and to allow the bad guys go inside. Well, I don't want to talk much about zonulin at this time, but what I want to make a point here is that this leaky gut is basically responsible for many, many different things that I'm going to talk about. But just want you to keep in mind, what is leaky gut? How does it begin? And then we'll come back sometimes tomorrow to talk about hormones and the role of hormones, how hormones play a role in affecting the overall imbalance in the body and chronic diseases. So don't forget tomorrow's lecture. Come back. That's going to be the most fun lecture. Well, all of the lectures are fun, but mine is the best. So I'm just trying to keep you awake. Are you all still with me? Because if you're not, then I'm going to start all over again. Anyways, so the leaky gut progression, what happens is all these factors that are responsible, stress, toxins, food particles, drugs, pathogens, and all kinds of other stuff. Same thing that we just talked about. There is opening between these cells, and then the process of food intolerances begin, which basically causes all the immune system issues. And once that process begins, then it's responsible for many, many different conditions, including what you see on the screen right now. It's not limited to these conditions, the effects of leaky gut. Let's talk a little bit about how the immune system is affected. What is the role of the immune system in leaky gut and its relationship to chronic diseases? So basis of a healthy immune system is a balance between the stimulating immune system and the inhibiting immune system. So when I say stimulating immune system, I'm talking about all the lifestyle, the sport, water, nutrition, relaxation, herbs, vitamins, supplements, whatever you name it. And on the other side, when I say inhibiting immune system, I'm talking about age, stress, alcohol, allergen, pathogen, and all kinds of bad stuff, which is affecting and inhibiting the overall immune system. When we talk about nutrition, it plays a role on both sides. Eat right, it's good. It's on the stimulating side. Eat bad, it's on the other side, the inhibiting immune system. So nutrition it's significantly important in overall balance. And this is what we need to be very clear at this time to understand the difference between food allergy and food intolerance. You heard Dr. Lambert say about innate immune system, right? We have to focus on the innate immune system, and that's what I'm trying to explain here. What is innate immune system, and what are the differences between food allergy and food intolerance? So food allergy and food intolerance, as you can see, both are genetic exposure related. There's food allergen or all kinds of protein on the food allergy side. Food substances, herbs, chemicals can cause food intolerance. Now, when we talk about IgE release or IgE involvement or any kind of acute reactions, this falls under specific branch of immunity. Now, when I say specific branch of immunity, it's specific memory-related immunity, antibody formation, acute reactions, right? Memory-based defense mechanism, which is called specific immunity. Now, on the other side is food intolerance, which is because of inflammation pathway. There is that innate branch of immunity involved on this side when we talk about intolerance, which is based on inflammation, delayed reaction, long-term, not specific. So we call this as an adaptive or non-specific or innate immunity. Adaptive or specific is food allergy. So these are basically the two branches that I just explained. So when we say innate or unspecific immunity, we're talking about involvement of macrophages and neutrophils, right? And this is basically based on all the phagocytosis and inflammation pathway. And I'll talk a little bit more detail later on. On the other side, the B cell and T cell are part of the specific immunity, the acquired defense mechanism, the specific memory-based defense mechanism. Are you still with me? Yes. Thank you. Now, what happens to this immune system? I want to go a little bit deeper into this. There are different kinds of immunomodulators, different factors that are responsible for affecting the immune system. Now, there are exogenic factors, there are endogenic factors. Now, what are these exogenic factors? These are called PAMPs, pathogen-associated molecular pattern. So these could be bacteria, viruses, fungi. These are all called PAMPs. Pathogen-associated molecular pattern factors. And on the other side, there are DAMs, which are danger-associated molecular pattern, which are induced factors or induced modulators. Now, how does that induction take place is it's triggered by UV or mechanical irritation or food or many other different factors can trigger the formation of DAMs. How does the immune system affect or react to these PAMs and DAMs? Here's this neutrophil that you can look at, the neutrophil cell. So there's this protein pattern recognition receptors. There are receptors outside these neutrophils which can recognize these PAMs and DAMs. So these immunomodulators, they attack the neutrophils to cause or to activate the process of inflammation, the inflammatory cascade, which basically leads to rupturing of these cells and release of all the cytokines, the reactive oxygen species, which are mainly responsible to take care of all of the, or any of the foreign particle that has attacked those neutrophils. So this is what is acute reaction. But when it becomes chronic, that's a problem. Whenever this process becomes chronic, that is when the real problem begins. So what do type 2 diabetes, atherosclerosis, and autoinflammatory diseases have in common? This is something really interesting that you will find. Now, I'm talking about inflammation. Inflammation is common. But today, I'm going to give you a name, which is a wonderful piece of information that I'm sure many of you haven't heard about this, inflammasome. Be honest. Tell me how many of you have heard this term, inflammasome. See, there are only few. Yes. So I can give you some a new piece of information. So this inflammasome is basically a set of proteins. It's a multi-protein complex which sits inside the macrophages and neutrophils, which is involved in the inflammation pathway or the activation of inflammation that becomes chronic later on. So this is an assembly triggered by particles emerged during infection, tissue damage, or metabolic imbalances. So whenever there is any tissue injury, the inflammasome, which is a multi-protein complex, becomes active. And that leads to initiation of inflammation pathway. You heard about these pattern recognition receptors in the last slides, in two slides earlier. So there is this cytosolic pattern recognition receptor, which is called NLR, which is NOD-like receptor. So this is activated, and it activates the caspase-1. The protein caspase-1 is activated, which processes basically pro-interleukins 18 and pro-interleukin 1 beta, which are mainly responsible for activation of inflammasome, which participates in programmed cell death called pyroptosis. So basically, it kills itself and releases all the cytokines. This is how it works. This is the process of overall inflammatory cascade. So basically, summary of what I already talked about the last slide. Here are the PAMs and the DAMs. Now you know what are the PAMs and DAMs. When these attack this cell, these are the trigger, right? These PAM and DAMs are the triggers. And when they attack these immune cells on the pattern recognition receptors, they bind to these receptors and cause activation of inflammasome inside these cells. which ultimately results in bursting of the cell and release of all the cytokines. And when it becomes chronic, when there is PAMs and DAMs continuously attacking the pattern recognition receptors, the process is chronic. And when that process becomes chronic, that is a big problem. And it has been seen, there are a number of studies available which have shown that there is an abnormal inflammasome activity in most of the chronic disorders. So now, let me bring your attention back to the point that I started with. Let's focus on the mechanism. Let's not talk about cardiovascular disease or diabetes or metabolic syndrome or any other diseases. Let's talk about these mechanisms. Let's focus on these mechanisms. Are you still with me? You know what? If you stay awake throughout next 30 minutes, I have a wonderful gift for all of you at the end of the lecture. And you're going to love it. I promise. So stick around, hang in there. I know lunch is doing its job, but please, please keep me awake. So, and it has been seen that inflammasome regulation affects the overall homeostasis. And it has been shown that basically most of these chronic diseases begin with metabolic syndrome, right? And some inflammasome has been shown to be involved in metabolic syndrome, thereby atherosclerosis and obesity and diabetes, et cetera, et cetera. Now, since we are talking about food intolerance, what are the different factors that are responsible for causing food intolerance, for causing those changes that result in food intolerances? The nutrition, you heard nutrition this morning. Intestinal flora, you heard a little bit on the microbiome. All kinds of diet, poor food choices that we make. Not the one that we had in lunch. It was wonderful. So I'm not blaming that food. And all kinds of stress, basically any kind of stress, physical, emotional, any kind of abuse, that's what I'm blaming on. That's what I'm talking about. These are the factors, these are the things that cause chronic inflammation or initiate chronic inflammation. So when we talk about stimulating immune system, the nutrition in the stimulating immune system, we know that there is, well, you heard a lot about vitamin C. I don't really need to talk more about that. Trace minerals, selenium, copper, zinc, omega fatty acids. So you heard about all of this good stuff this morning. So these are all immunomodulators on the stimulating side. Then on the other side, when we are talking about the inhibiting immune system, our job is to identify all of those factors that are causing or that are immunomodulators on the inhibiting immune system side. All kinds of additives or anything that is activating the innate immune system to cause overall inflammation, right? We should be able to clearly identify all of those important factors that are reactive to the body negatively. And if we are able to identify and eliminate all of those negative immunomodulators, we can do some good stuff. There are all kinds of different tests available. For food allergy, I'm sure you have access to different tests that are there. Some radioactivity-based tests and non-radioactivity-based tests. And then For food intolerance also, there are different tests available, food sensitivity tests. But let me tell you one blood test that can save your or your patient's life. One single blood test. Anybody can guess? Anybody wants to guess? Come on, don't be shy. The thing is, these conferences are meant for the purpose of learning and not being shy. Trust me, yeah. You don't have to be shy. See, the idea is that we all get together, talk to each other, collaborate, mingle, and not just listen to the speakers, because they are not always right. There is always something up in those slides which some of you would not agree with me on that. You might have a newer piece of information or a newer piece of data or some scientific paper. So please do not feel shy or hesitate to tell me, hey, Sanjay, no, that's not right. I know something better. So please do that. And trust me, I am not offended. I would be very, very appreciative and thankful if I learned something from you. So, any more guesses? Come on. CRP. See, Dr. Levy gave it away this morning. C-reactive protein is, when we are talking about inflammation, C-reactive protein plays a very, very important role in inflammation. And you heard that if the test comes out with a value of more than 1, then you really need to pay more attention to that. Because C-reactive protein, the increased C-reactive protein, has been again and again established as a link between several different conditions. Well, here it's just showing the cardiovascular disease. Is abdominal obesity the missing link? It shows the metabolic syndrome, release of all of these inflammatory markers, and which leads to increased C-reactive protein, and that is very well established now. And it's not just cardiovascular disease, but every chronic disease, C-reactive protein is emerging as a very, very important marker to test for. And the reason is that the inflammation basically sits in the middle of all of the chronic diseases that we are talking about today. What are the causes? Well, you heard in general about immunomodulators. What are the causes? What are the important things that we need to pay more attention to in terms of what we are doing on a daily basis? Low fiber, high sugar processed food is #1 cause of leaky gut. All that good stuff, good looking stuff. Well, they say all that food that looks good is bad for you. And all that bad looking food is good for you. Which is kind of sad. So this is #1 cause. I know you might say, oh, I eat fruits. But look at this. All these foods, including apple. Well, 1 apple a day keeps the doctor away. Right? Well, it should be changed to 1 Granny Smith apple keeps the doctor away, not the other apples. Most of the foods that you see on the left side of the slide, that is not what you should be bragging about. I know you will all agree with me on this. Overuse of medications, all kinds of pharmaceutical drugs. You heard Dr. Soul this morning talking about you get expensive urine. Low-grade bug imbalance. So we talked about microbiome. We talked about there is so much of bacteria, good and bad, sitting in the gut. So whenever there is imbalance of the overall gut biosis, which is called gut dysbiosis. That leads to leaky gut. Poor digestive enzyme function, stress. Stress comes up again and again all the time. And this is what I'm going to give you a gift at the end of the lecture. Well, I'm not going to tell you what it is. And overall hormone imbalance. See, I'm very, very passionate about hormones, which I will be talking to you about hormones and hormone balance tomorrow. But hormones have a very, very significant role in controlling the protein zonulin. You remember I talked about zonulin, which is responsible for opening and closure of epithelial cell lining, which is protecting us. So hormones have a very significant role. And whenever there is imbalance in these hormones, that leads to the chronic diseases. But just to give you an idea here, that all of these hormones, they work in conjunction with each other. All the sex hormones, adrenals, insulin, thyroid, they all work together. Nothing in body works in isolation. So is the hormones. They work with each other. Hormones, all of these hormones, they are like a spider web. You pull one end of the spider web, the whole spider web is disturbed, right? All of these hormones are like an orchestra, a symphony that work together. One musical instrument in an orchestra starts playing different tune, you get to know right away that there's something wrong with the orchestra, the symphony. So everything has to work in conjunction with each other, and then they have effect on many other different modulators, which lead to overall inflammation. So basically, again, coming back to inflammation. So inflammation is something that sits in the middle of most of the stuff that you see, especially when we are talking about gut dysbiosis. I know it's a little complicated looking slide, but if you pay attention to how this inflammation, let's begin with the stress. So stress affects inflammation directly. Stress affects hormones like cortisol. Cortisol can lead to insulin resistance, increased insulin. That has been connected with leaky brain, metabolic syndrome, sleep disruption, gut dysbiosis, right? They're all interconnected with each other. If you look at the leaky gut here, leaky gut directly is affected by inflammation, leads to all kinds of issues and allergies and food intolerances that we talked about, right? Disturbance in right here, SIBO, small intestine, bacterial overgrowth, low stomach acid, again stress. So these are all interconnected with each other. Why? Because there is this inflammation, chronic inflammation sitting in the middle, in the center of all of these problems. Well, you want to talk about diseases? Let's talk about diseases. If you want to talk about cardiovascular disease, what happens is pattern recognition or toll-like receptors. You remember those pattern recognition receptors? The pattern recognition receptors are attacked. There is release of inflammatory cytokines, oxidative damage, overall mitochondrial dysfunction. You heard this morning all about mitochondrial dysfunction, how the mitochondria fails, and then myocyte and vascular cell death, and then cardiovascular disease, right? This is what happens in cardiovascular disease. Okay, you want to talk about gastrointestinal disease? It's the same pathway. Same pattern recognition receptors, again, cytokine release, oxidative stress, mitochondrial failure, enterocyte dysfunction, and then leaky gut. Same mechanism, but a different disease name. You want to talk about Alzheimer's? Again, the same mechanism. Microglial activation, again cytokines, oxidative stress, mitochondrial dysfunction, neuronal death, Alzheimer's. Let's call it Alzheimer's. You want to talk about cancer? Again, the same process. It's the cell receptor stimulation, inflammatory cytokines, oxidative stress, mitochondrial dysfunction. Same thing. Then why are we talking separately about diseases when the mechanism is the same? This is what I want your attention to. This is what is functional medicine. Let's not just get lost within those names of diseases, because diseases don't exist. It's the mechanisms. It's the common mechanisms that we have to pay more attention to. Do you agree with me? Oh, come on. I need to hear it more louder. Yes. Thank you so much. Well, I don't want to go into detail of the slides, but since you've already heard about mitochondrial damage, since the theme is mitochondria, right? We've been talking about mitochondrial damage because of any of these factors. When the mitochondria is damaged, there is cytosolic mitochondrial DNA release, which basically activates the process of inflammation through inflammasome. Now you all know inflammasome, right? So whenever there is mitochondrial damage, there is activation or initiation of inflammation pathway through inflammasome, and release of extracellular mitochondrial DNA, which leads to all kinds of pathways of inflammation. Okay, we talked about all the problems. Now you will ask me, give me the solution too. So I have the solution too for all of these issues that come down to common mechanisms. So how do we fix, well, we're talking about gut right now. How do we fix the gut? So I have these 5 steps to reduce inflammation for yourself and your patients. Just simple 5 steps. Eliminate the cause. Number 1 is eliminate the cause. We talked about all those different causes, right? You remember those? Yes? Yes? Okay. So don't forget those. So first of all, eliminate the cause. Now what are those causes? I know it's easier said than done. We tell others to do it because it's very simple and easy to tell others. So eliminate all of those bad stuff, all the bad food. Eat right. You heard from Dr. Lambert this morning. Eat right. It's very, very strong and very, very important statement. And you all know what does that mean, eat right, right? All kinds of green stuff, different herbs, apple cider vinegar, green tea, there are herbal teas, there are many different kinds of herbal teas that are anti-inflammatory in the fruits and good stuff, right? Eat mini meals. Eat mini meals during the day, but not these mini meals. Make sure to break your meals in smaller portions throughout the day. Spread your meals. Protein appetizers in between those meals so that those meals stay mini meals. Healthy breakfast is a must. I always eat a big healthy breakfast because it's a long fasting after my dinner at 6 p.m. last night. So I need a big breakfast every morning. Forget all those packaged, fat-free, low-calorie, all kinds of good foods. You know what I mean by good foods, right? So please forget about all of those high-claim, low-calorie or fat-free foods. Number 3 is heal and repair your gut. How do you heal and repair your gut? There are all kinds of different good stuff available. Aloe vera, licorice root, curcumin, quercetin. All of this is extremely helpful in healing your gut. A lot of studies, a lot of data available there. And it's easily available everywhere. Number 4, optimize healthy bacteria. So once you have healed your gut, once you have eliminated the cause, once you start eating right, once you have healed your gut, or actually, I need to tell you how to optimize healthy bacteria. Anybody can guess? How can we optimize healthy bacteria? Probiotics, right? Probiotics and prebiotics. How do you choose a good probiotic? I mean, there are so many available out there. What do you need to pay more attention to is that any of the probiotics that you choose should have these 3 bacterial strains. Why? Because these are the 3 most important bacterial strains that are responsible for boosting immune system, immune function, maintaining normal cholesterol levels, production of vitamin B6, B12. These are all good bacteria. And then you have to choose right prebiotics, a good food for these bacteria, right? Finally, reduce stress. Most important of all is reduce stress, because once you have taken care of your gut, if you're continuously staying stressed, it's not going to change anything. It's going to bring you back to where you started with. How do you stress? Chill out. Have fun. Do something which makes you happy. What you need to do is, you need to reduce your stress, decrease your cortisol and epinephrine. Do anything that you like. Try to reduce your cortisol and epinephrine. Increase your serotonin and dopamine. Tell me honestly, how many of you do this when you go to bed? I know at least one person who sleeps next to me does that. And I keep telling that, please stop, don't do that. Get a good night's sleep. Very, very important to decrease your cortisol levels. Extremely important, good sleep. Increase your leptin, melatonin, growth hormone, right? See, it's not a new piece of information that I'm giving you. I'm sure all of you know. It's just that we all need those reminders. Get active. Say, eat right, exercise well. Brisk walking 30 minutes per day for fitness and 45 to 60 minutes for weight loss. That has been recommended. How do you balance your hormones? See, I'm coming back again to hormones, because it's so important to keep your hormones in balance. How to keep your hormones in balance? If it is high insulin, you need to get high protein diet and exercise to bring it back to normal. If it is high cortisol, you need to get enough sleep, eat right, mini meals, right? You remember those mini meals? Reduce your stress. If estrogen levels are high, green tea helps, turmeric, flax, chia seeds, good stuff. Low testosterone, weight training, zinc are very helpful. If DHEA is low, you can supplement with DHEA. Relora herbal supplement, and all kinds of different stuff, supplements are available. What kind of hormone assessments that you need to do in order to keep all of this good stuff that we talked about? C-reactive protein, always Make sure that you measure for C-reactive protein. We talked about that. Cortisol DHEA, measure your cortisol DHEA. And for measuring cortisol and DHEA, especially cortisol, make sure that you're measuring it in saliva, not blood. And that is a whole different workshop, 2-hour lecture that I do on how to choose the right lab test. And if anybody is interested, please come and talk to me how to choose the right lab test. Why saliva test or why blood test, when to choose cortisol or DHEA or testosterone or estrogen or progesterone. Measure androgen levels, testosterone, and estrogen, and of course progesterone as well, because it's very, very important to maintain the ratio between progesterone and estrogen to the right ratio. And I'll be more than happy to talk more on that, not in this lecture, of course. Test for insulin resistance and glucose dysregulation. So these are the things that you need to be testing, measuring, whenever you're looking at issues, any chronic issues. So I think I will stop here and give you that gift that I promised to you. Can I ask all of you to stand wherever you are? Don't worry, I won't ask you to do anything crazy. This is a gift that I'm giving you for free, which will show you how to de-stress yourself in 2 minutes. Find some open space so that you don't hit somebody else. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play a video, so follow those instructions. And don't be shy. Can we have sound?
All right, brothers
Come
and
on, guys.
sisters, it's time for an African dance liftoff. Get
Just
out of those
follow
chairs
those
and get ready to
instructions.
move. All right, our first line of instruction
And
is...
trust me, your
we're gonna
hair,
go ahead and give ourselves
women,
plenty
your
of
hair
room
won't
to
mess
the
up.
sides, back and front. In African dance, we're going to use the energy from each other.
Just follow those
to create a
instructions,
positive
very
environment for
simple
exercise.
steps.
So we want to knock out our fellow exercises with a punch or a kick. Okay? Everybody got plenty of room?
Trust
All
me,
right,
you're
let's
going to
get
have
moving.
fun.
All right, this is
Just
our
give me
march.
2
March
minutes.
it out. Now with this march, we're finding the beat to the rhythm. Find the drums. Once you find the drums, you're going to hold on to this for the entire
Come on,
exercise
everybody.
period. All right, let's stretch out a little bit. We're going to start off with some shoulder rolls, one at a time, alternating. Left and right. Here we go. Left
And right.
Just
Left.
like so. Good.
Shoulders.
Both at the same time. There we
Both
go.
of the shoulders at the same time.
Good.
Come on, it's not a big deal. It's easy.
All right, let's stretch out our necks. We're going to look down and up. Here we go. Down.
Down and up. Look down
Down.
and up.
Up. Down.
And up.
Up one more time. Down. And up. Side to side.
Trust
Left,
me, it's better
drop
than
in the
that
middle.
2-hour massage that
Right.
you guys are looking
In the
for.
middle. Left. In the middle. Right. In the middle. Now go ahead and widen your stance a little bit. We're going to go ahead and do some hip rolls.
Come
Side
on.
to side, left to right.
This
Left
is the fun part.
and right.
Left and
And
right.
Everybody move those hips.
Left and right. Left and right.
One more time. Left
And right.
Now all the way around. Like
All
a
the way
hula hoop.
around.
Don't be afraid. Ladies, gentlemen, you all can
Don't
do
be
this.
shy.
Good. Couple more. Good.
Come on.
Now here we go. March it out.
It's fun, right? Let's stop right
Go
here.
ahead and start our exercises. Our first one is called Beat the Drum.